Richard Kane sat at the head of the glass table in his company's boardroom on the 42nd floor. The morning sun shone through the massive windows as he watched the 15 board members discuss quarterly profits. Numbers flashed on the key wall screens showing his tech empire growing bigger every day. At 55 years old, Richard had built Quantum Dynamics Corporation from nothing into one of the world's most powerful companies. "Sir, the new AI systems are performing beyond expectations," said board member Helen Carter. "Revenue is up 30% this quarter." Richard nodded but felt strange. His head started to hurt in a way he had never experienced before. The pain felt like someone was drilling into his skull with tiny needles. He blinked hard and tried to focus on the presentation, but the numbers on the screen began to blur together. "The Space Mining Division has found rare metals on asteroid 247b, another board member continued. "We should see massive profits next year." Richard's hands started to shake. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Something was very wrong. The shaking got worse and sweat began to pour down his face even though the room was cool. His heart began beating so fast it felt like it might explode in his chest. "Richard, are you okay?" Helen asked, noticing his pale face. Before Richard could answer, his body jerked violently. His muscles felt like they were being twisted by invisible hands. Pain shot through every part of his body as he fell from his chair onto the cold marble floor. His body shook uncontrollably as the board members rushed to help him. "Call 911 right now," Helen shouted while kneeling beside Richard, "and get Dr. Martinez on the phone." Richard could hear their voices but could not speak. His vision went dark for a moment, then came back with strange colors he had never seen before. The ceiling lights looked different, almost like they were alive and moving. His skin felt like it was burning and freezing at the same time. Within minutes, paramedics arrived at the building. They checked Richard's pulse and blood pressure while asking him questions he could not answer. His throat felt like it was full of sand, and his tongue would not move the right way. The paramedics looked confused as they read their equipment. "His vital signs are all over the place," one paramedic said to the other. "I've never seen readings like this before." They loaded Richard onto a stretcher and rushed him to the elevator. As they moved through the building, Richard noticed that electronic devices near him were acting strange. Computer screens flickered, and cell phones made weird noises. Even the elevator buttons lit up without anyone touching them. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez ran every test he could think of. Blood tests, brain scans, heart monitors, and X-rays all came back with results that made no sense. Richard's blood showed chemicals that should not exist in the human body. His brain waves looked like patterns from someone in deep sleep, but he was awake and aware. "I need to call in specialists," Dr. Martinez told Helen, who had followed the ambulance to the hospital. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen." Within hours, doctors began arriving from around the world. Dr. Patricia Holmes came from Boston, Dr. James Liu from Tokyo, and Dr. Maria Santos from Brazil. Soon 15 of the world's best doctors gathered around Richard's bed in the private medical wing that money could buy. Each doctor ran their own tests, but the results only got stranger. Richard's body temperature kept changing from very hot to very cold every few minutes. His heart rate would jump from slow to extremely fast without warning. Most bizarre of all, his cells seemed to be changing shape under the microscope. Dr. Holmes studied the test results with growing confusion. "It's like his DNA is being rewritten in real time," she told the other doctors. "But there's no virus, no bacteria, nothing that should cause this." Richard's assistant called his estate to explain the situation. Grace Washington answered the phone in the kitchen where she was preparing lunch. At 62 years old, Grace had worked for the Kane family for over 20 years. She was a quiet woman who kept the massive house running smoothly while staying mostly invisible to the wealthy family. "Mrs. Washington, Mr. Kane is very sick in the hospital," the assistant explained. "The doctors don't know what's wrong. They want to move him to the medical room at the estate where they can monitor him better." Grace felt worried. She had seen Richard grow from a young, ambitious man into a powerful billionaire, but he had always been kind to her. She immediately began preparing the medical wing of the estate that was used when family members needed private care. By evening, Richard was moved to his estate in a special ambulance filled with medical equipment. The 15 doctors set up their instruments in the medical wing, turning it into a high-tech hospital room. Machines beeped and hummed while screens showed Richard's strange vital signs. Grace brought coffee and food to the doctors, moving quietly through the room while they worked. She noticed things that the doctors were too busy to see. The plants in Richard's room were growing faster than normal. The grandfather clock in the hallway had stopped working. Even the family cats avoided the medical wing completely. As night fell, Richard's condition got worse. He started speaking in his sleep, but the words were not English. They sounded like numbers and mathematical equations. Dr. Holmes recorded everything, hoping to find clues about what was happening to his brain. His neural activity is off the charts, Dr. Liu reported. It's like his brain is receiving signals from somewhere else. Grace stood in the doorway listening to the doctor's talk. She had raised 6 children and taken care of sick family members her whole life. Her instincts told her that Richard was not sick in the normal way. Something else was happening to him, something the fancy machines could not measure. The doctors worked through the night, but Richard only got worse. His body continued to change in ways that defied medical science. Grace watched from the shadows, taking notes in her simple notebook about things the doctors missed. She had a feeling that the answer to Richard's mystery would not come from expensive equipment, but from careful observation and common sense. The second day brought no relief for Richard or the doctors trying to save him. Dr. Holmes studied the latest blood test results with growing frustration. Every sample showed the same impossible readings. Richard's blood contained elements that did not exist on Earth, yet somehow his body was producing them naturally. "Look at this," Dr. Santos called to the other doctors while pointing at her computer screen. "His cellular structure is reorganizing itself every few hours." The doctors gathered around the microscope images that showed Richard's cells changing, shaped like tiny living puzzles. Normal human cells stayed the same shape their entire life, but Richard's cells were transforming into forms that looked almost crystalline. Dr. Liu ran another brain scan and shook his head in disbelief. His brain activity suggests he's receiving and processing information at impossible speeds. It's like someone connected a supercomputer directly to his nervous system. Richard lay unconscious most of the time, but when he woke up, he spoke in mathematical sequences that made the doctors write down every word. The equations he recited were far beyond current human knowledge, dealing with concepts of space travel and energy that scientists were only beginning to understand. Grace brought fresh towels to the medical wing and overheard Dr. Holmes talking to her team. "We've tried every treatment we know. Antibiotics, antivirals, radiation therapy, even experimental nanotechnology. Nothing stops whatever is happening to him." While the doctors focused on their machines and tests, Grace continued her quiet observations. She noticed that electronic devices throughout the house were malfunctioning more each day. The microwave in the kitchen stopped working. The television in the living room showed strange static patterns. Even her simple digital watch had stopped keeping correct time. During her lunch break, Grace sat in the garden behind the estate and thought about what she was seeing. Her grandfather had taught her to watch the sky when she was young, growing up in rural Alabama. He always said the stars had patterns that smart people could learn to read. That night, Grace decided to check on Richard when the doctors were taking a break. She entered the medical wing quietly and sat in the chair beside his bed. Richard's breathing was steady, but his skin had a strange glow that the overhead lights could not explain. As Grace watched, she noticed something the doctors had missed. Richard's condition seemed to change with a rhythm. Every few hours his temperature would spike, then return to normal. His heart rate followed the same pattern. She looked at the clock and wrote down the exact times in her notebook. "You're not supposed to be in here," Dr. Holmes said as she returned to check the monitors. "I'm sorry, doctor," Grace replied. "I was just worried about Mr. Kane. I've worked for this family for 20 years. Dr. Holmes softened her expression. "We're doing everything we can. His condition is unlike anything in medical literature." Grace nodded and quietly left the room, but she continued her observations from the hallway. She noticed that the strange episodes happened exactly every 4 hours and 23 minutes. Her grandfather had taught her that the stars moved, in patterns, and she wondered if Richard's condition might have the same kind of rhythm. On the third day, Richard's corporate headquarters was in chaos. Stock prices were falling as rumors spread about the CEO's mysterious illness. Helen Carter tried to manage the company, but without Richard's leadership, major decisions were being delayed. "We need to make an announcement," board member Frank Torres insisted. "The shareholders deserve to know what's happening." "We can't tell them he's dying from something the best doctors in the world can't identify," Helen replied. "It would destroy the company." Meanwhile, at the estate, the medical team was running out of ideas. They had consulted with experts around the world through video calls, but no one had ever seen symptoms like Richard's. Dr. Martinez from the original hospital visited to check on his patient. "Any progress?" he asked Dr. Holmes. "His condition is stable but completely unexplainable," she answered. "We're keeping him alive, but we don't understand what's happening to his body." Grace served dinner to the doctors in the estate's dining room and listened to their conversations. They talked about advanced theories of biology and physics that she did not understand, but she noticed they all seemed lost and frustrated. After dinner, Grace returned to her small apartment above the garage. She opened her notebook and studied the patterns she had been recording. Richard's episodes happened like clockwork, but the timing reminded her of something from her childhood. She remembered her grandfather's old astronomy books and the stories. He told about how ancient people used the stars to navigate and predict events. Grace walked outside and looked up at the night sky. The moon was in a different position than it had been when Richard first got sick. Using her grandfather's old star charts that she kept in a wooden box, Grace began comparing the timing of Richard's episodes with the movement of celestial bodies. She was not a scientist, but she had learned to read the patterns in the sky from years of helping her grandfather with his amateur astronomy. To her amazement, she discovered that Richard's condition changed exactly when certain stars moved into specific positions relative to Earth. The episodes corresponded with the rotation of the planet and the movement of particular constellations. Grace realized that Richard was not sick with any earthly disease. Something from space was affecting him, and it followed the same predictable patterns that governed the movement of stars and planets. She wanted to tell the doctors about her discovery, but she knew they would not take seriously the observations of a housekeeper who never went to college. Still, Grace continued documenting the patterns, convinced that her simple notebook contained the key to understanding Richard's mysterious condition. The next morning brought news that Richard's vital signs were getting stronger, but his cellular changes were accelerating. The doctors prepared for another day of tests and theories, unaware that the answer to their medical mystery was written in the stars above their heads, observed by a woman whose wisdom came from generations of rural knowledge passed down through her family. Grace woke up before dawn on the 5th day and immediately checked her star charts. According to her calculations, Richard should have another episode in exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. She had been right about the timing for 3 days straight, but the doctors still did not know about her discovery. She made breakfast for the medical team and listened to Dr. Holmes discussing the latest test results with her colleagues. "His brain activity spikes every few hours like clockwork," Dr. Holmes said, "but we can't find any internal cause for the pattern." "It has to be neurological," Dr. Liu suggested. "Maybe a tumor we can't detect with current technology." Grace quietly served coffee and wanted to speak up, but she knew the doctors would dismiss her ideas. She was just a housekeeper to them, someone who cleaned their equipment and brought them food. They had spent years in medical school and had access to the most advanced technology in the world. At exactly the time Grace predicted, alarms started beeping throughout the medical wing. Richard's heart rate jumped to dangerous levels while his brain waves showed the strange patterns the doctors had been tracking. Grace looked at her watch and made another note in her notebook. "Right on schedule," Dr. Santos observed. "Whatever is causing this follows a precise timeline." After the episode passed, Grace gathered her courage and approached Dr. Holmes. "Excuse me, doctor," she said quietly. "I think I might know something about Mr. Kane's condition." Dr. Holmes looked up from her tablet with tired eyes. "What do you mean?" "I've been keeping track of when his episodes happen," Grace explained, showing her simple notebook. "They match up with the movement of stars in the sky. Dr. Holmes took the notebook and flipped through pages of handwritten times and notes. This is interesting, but medical conditions don't follow astronomical patterns. My grandfather taught me about the stars, Grace continued. He said everything in space moves in patterns. Mr. Kane's sickness follows the same kind of pattern. Dr. Holmes studied the notes more carefully. Grace had recorded not just the times of Richard's episodes, but also the positions of specific stars and constellations. The correlation was undeniable, even if it seemed impossible. Dr. Liu, come look at this, Dr. Holmes called to her colleague. Dr. Liu examined Grace's notebook with growing interest. These timings match our recordings exactly. How did you know to track stellar positions? When I was little, my grandfather showed me how sailors used stars to find their way across the ocean, Grace explained. He said patterns in the sky connect to patterns on Earth. The doctors looked at each other with surprise. They had been focusing on medical causes while Grace had been thinking about connections to space. Her simple observations might hold the key to understanding Richard's condition. Dr. Holmes decided to test Grace's theory. According to your notes, the next episode should happen in 6 hours and 41 minutes. Let's see if you're right. Word spread quickly among the medical team about the housekeeper's astronomical observations. Some doctors were skeptical that a woman without scientific training could identify patterns they had missed. Others were intrigued by the possibility that Richard's condition had an extraterrestrial cause. Dr. Martinez returned to the estate that afternoon to hear about Grace's discovery. You're telling me that a housekeeper figured out what 15 specialists couldn't? He asked Dr. Holmes. Her predictions have been accurate for 4 days straight, Dr. Holmes replied. We can't ignore the correlation between his episodes and celestial movements. As evening approached, the doctors prepared to test Grace's prediction. Monitoring equipment was set up to record everything that happened during the predicted episode. Time. Grace stood in the back of the room, nervous about whether her calculations would prove correct again. At exactly the time Grace had predicted, Richard's body began to change. His heart rate spiked. His brain waves showed the familiar strange patterns, and his skin took on the mysterious glow that the doctors had been unable to explain. Incredible, Dr. Santos whispered. How is this possible? During this episode, something new happened. Richard opened his eyes and spoke clearly for the first time in days. Coordinates 779.426 by -12.881, he said in a calm voice. Dr. Liu quickly wrote down the numbers. Those sound like space coordinates. Distance from Sol, 473 light-years, Richard continued. Third planet from yellow star. Atmospheric, composition suitable for carbon-based life. The doctors stared at each other in amazement. Richard was providing specific information about a location in space, and he was speaking like he was reading from some kind of database. How do you know this? Dr. Holmes asked Richard. They are teaching me, Richard replied. Preparing me for communication. The distance between worlds requires careful calibration. Who is teaching you? Dr. Holmes pressed. Before Richard could answer, his eyes closed and he returned to unconsciousness. The episode was over, but the implications were staggering. Grace's astronomical observations had led to the discovery that Richard was somehow receiving information from space. Dr. Holmes immediately contacted government agencies that dealt with unusual phenomena. Within hours, scientists from NASA and the Department of Defense arrived at the estate. The medical wing was declared a classified research site. Grace found herself at the center of attention for the first time in her life. Government scientists wanted to know everything about her astronomical knowledge and how she had connected Richard's condition to celestial movements. Ma'am, your observations may have helped us identify humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, a NASA scientist told her. This is one of the most important discoveries in human history. Grace felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention, but she was glad that her simple observations had helped solve the mystery. She thought about her grandfather, who had taught her that wisdom could come from watching and thinking, not just from expensive equipment and fancy degrees. The estate was quickly transformed into a secure research facility. More scientists arrived each day to study Richard's condition and the possibility that aliens were using him to communicate with Earth. Grace's notebook became one of the most important documents in the investigation, proving that sometimes the biggest discoveries come from the most unexpected sources. General Robert Hayes arrived at the estate with a team of military scientists and communication experts. The quiet mansion had become the most secure location on Earth overnight. Soldiers guarded every entrance while specialists set up equipment to monitor any signals coming from space. "This is now a matter of national security," General Hayes told Dr. Holmes and her medical team. "If we're dealing with alien contact, we need to understand their intentions." Richard's episodes were becoming longer and more detailed. During each one, he provided specific information about star systems, technology, and something he called the architects. The government scientists recorded every word, trying to understand what the aliens wanted. Grace continued her astronomical observations, but now she worked alongside professional scientists who were amazed by her accuracy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a NASA astrobiologist, studied Grace's simple notebook with great interest. "Your grandfather taught you well," Dr. Rodriguez told Grace. "Some of these patterns match deep space phenomena we've only recently discovered with advanced telescopes." During the next episode, Richard's communication became even clearer. "The architects have been searching for species with suitable neural compatibility," he said while staring at the ceiling. "Most intelligent life forms lack the biological flexibility required for interface. What do they want from us?" Dr. Holmes asked. "Not from you," Richard replied. "They want to give. Humanity possesses rare qualities that other species have lost through evolution." General Hayes leaned forward. "What kind of qualities?" "Adaptability, creative problem-solving, the ability to synthesize knowledge from diverse sources," Richard answered. "Most galactic civilizations become specialized and rigid. They lose the capacity for innovation." Grace listened from the corner of the room, thinking about what Richard was saying. The aliens seemed interested in humanity's differences, not their similarities to other species. "Why did they choose you?" Dr. Rodriguez asked Richard. "Neural, structure compatibility. But the choice was not entirely intentional," Richard explained. "The architects did not expect the complexity of human social systems. My absence from corporate responsibilities has created unintended consequences." This was true. Richard's company was in chaos, and the global economy was showing signs of strain. Stock markets around the world were fluctuating wildly as rumors spread about the mysterious illness affecting one of the world's most powerful businessmen. Dr. Holmes realized that their medical interventions might be interfering with the alien communication process. "We've been treating Richard like he was sick," she told the team. "But what if the changes to his body are intentional modifications, not symptoms of disease?" The medical team began reducing their treatments and allowing Richard's body to continue its transformation. Within days, his vital signs stabilized, and the episodes became less painful for him. During a particularly long communication session, the architects spoke directly through Richard to the assembled scientists. "We greet the humans with respect," the voice said through Richard's mouth, though it sounded different from his normal speech. "Your species shows promise for joining the galactic community." General Hayes stepped forward. "What are your intentions regarding Earth?" "We offer partnership, not conquest," the architects replied. "Your planet possesses resources we value, but not material resources. We are interested in human cognitive diversity." Dr. Rodriguez asked, "What do you mean by cognitive diversity?" "Observe the recent discovery process," the architects answered. "Advanced medical technology failed to identify the communication pattern. The solution came from traditional knowledge applied by an individual your society considers peripheral." All eyes turned to Grace, who felt embarrassed by the attention. The aliens were talking about her discovery, and how her grandfather's teachings had solved the mystery that stumped 15 brilliant doctors. "This demonstrates humanity's greatest strength," the architects continued. "Your species values and integrates knowledge from all sources regardless of formal education or social status. Most galactic civilizations lose this ability as they advance technologically." Grace finally spoke up. Are you saying that my observations were important because I'm not a scientist? Your observations were important because you think differently than specialists, the architects replied through Richard. You connected patterns across disciplines that formal education often separates. Dr. Holmes began to understand. The aliens were not just interested in human intelligence, but in the way humans could combine different types of knowledge to solve problems. Grace's astronomical observations, learned from her grandfather's rural wisdom, had proven more valuable than advanced medical technology. We have encountered many species more intelligent than humans, the architects explained, but none that maintain such diversity in their approach to understanding the universe. Most civilizations eventually standardize their education and thinking processes, losing the creative chaos that drives innovation. General Hayes was skeptical. How do we know you're telling the truth about your peaceful intentions? Your species will make that determination through direct observation, the architects answered. We propose a formal introduction. Richard Kane will serve as primary communications interface, but we request that Grace Washington also participate as a representative of human cognitive diversity. Grace felt shocked. The aliens wanted her to help communicate with them, treating her as an equal to the billionaire businessman and the teams of scientists. Dr. Holmes looked at Grace with new respect. They recognize that your perspective is just as valuable as our advanced degrees and equipment. The architects provided specific coordinates for a meeting location in space, where a larger communication array waited. They explained that human spacecraft technology was sufficient to reach the location, though the journey would require international cooperation and resources. We will wait for your decision, the architects said. Time moves differently across the galaxy, but we are patient. When humanity is ready to meet us as equals, we will be here. The communication session ended, leaving the room full of scientists and military officials to contemplate humanity's first invitation to join an interstellar community. Grace sat quietly, amazed that her simple observations had led to this moment. General Hayes began making phone calls to world leaders, while Dr. Holmes started planning for the medical care Richard would need during space travel. Grace wondered if her grandfather could have imagined that his star charts would one day help humanity take its first steps toward the stars. The inside of the architect vessel was unlike anything the human crew had imagined. The walls seemed alive, shifting between different colors and textures as they walked through corridors that adjusted their size automatically. Grace noticed that the lighting changed to match their human vision perfectly, showing that the aliens had studied their biology carefully. The ship is responding to our presence, Dr. Rodriguez observed, watching the walls ripple as they passed. It's like the entire vessel is one giant organism. Richard walked ahead of the group, his connection to the architects guiding them toward the meeting chamber. His transformation was now complete, and he moved with a confidence that came from having access to alien knowledge while remaining fully human. They're waiting for us just ahead, Richard said. But I should warn you, the architects don't look like anything we've seen before. The meeting chamber was a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of space around them. Grace could see their own spacecraft docked to the alien vessel, and beyond that, the stars that had guided her observations back on Earth. In the center of the room stood three beings that defied easy description. They were tall and graceful, with bodies that seemed to be made of the same shifting material as their ship. Their faces were vaguely humanoid, but with features that changed subtly as Grace watched them. Welcome, humans, one of the architects spoke, though Grace could not see a mouth moving. The voice seemed to come from the air around them. We are pleased to meet you in person. Grace felt nervous but remembered her grandfather's advice about treating everyone with respect regardless of their appearance. She stepped forward and spoke clearly. Thank you for inviting us to meet with you. The architect seemed pleased by her direct approach. You are Grace Washington, the individual who identified our communication patterns. Your observations impressed us greatly. I just noticed that Mr. Kane's episodes match the movement of stars, Grace replied modestly. My grandfather taught me to watch for patterns in the sky. This demonstrates the cognitive diversity we find so valuable in your species, another architect explained. Most advanced civilizations would have assigned astronomical specialists to that task. Your culture allows individuals to develop knowledge across multiple disciplines. Commander Sullivan spoke up. What exactly do you want? From humanity? Partnership, the third architect replied. But first, we must determine if your species can maintain its adaptability as it advances technologically. Many civilizations lose their cognitive diversity as they become more sophisticated. Dr. Holmes asked, how do we prove that we won't make the same mistake? Through demonstration, the first architect answered. We will present you with challenges that require different types of thinking. Your success will depend on combining formal scientific knowledge with intuitive understanding. The architects created a series of holographic displays showing complex problems that had faced other species in the galaxy. Some were mathematical puzzles that required advanced calculation. Others were pattern recognition tasks that needed intuitive leaps. Still others required understanding social dynamics and cultural adaptation. Your team must solve these challenges. Together, the architect explained. Each problem requires different cognitive approaches. No single individual can solve them all. Grace looked at the displays with growing confidence. These were the kinds of problems that humans solved best, by working together and combining their different strengths. The first challenge was a mathematical equation involving quantum mechanics and interstellar navigation. Dr. Rodriguez and Richard worked together to solve the complex calculations, with Richard accessing architect knowledge, while Dr. Rodriguez applied human scientific methods. Second challenge involved recognizing patterns in alien communication signals. Grace studied the displays and noticed rhythms that reminded her of celestial movements. Her pattern recognition skills, developed from years of watching the sky, allowed her to identify the hidden message in the signals. The third challenge required understanding the social structure of an alien civilization and predicting how they would respond to first contact. Dr. Holmes applied her medical knowledge of human psychology, while Commander Sullivan used his military experience with cultural differences to develop a diplomatic approach. Each challenge required the humans to combine different types of knowledge and thinking. The architects watched with great interest as the crew solved problems by sharing their diverse perspectives and expertise. Remarkable, one of the architects observed. Most species attempt these challenges by assigning specialists to each problem. Your team naturally integrates different approaches. Grace realized that the aliens were testing humanity's ability to work together across different fields of knowledge. This was what made humans special in the galaxy, not their intelligence, but their willingness to learn from each other regardless of background or education. The final challenge was the most complex. The architects presented a scenario where human colonists on a distant planet faced multiple crises: equipment failures, medical emergencies, and first contact with local alien life forms. This requires technical knowledge, medical expertise, cultural understanding, and creative problem-solving, the architect explained. How would your species respond? The human crew spent hours discussing the scenario. Grace's practical experience managing a large household proved valuable in coordinating resources. Dr. Holmes's medical knowledge addressed the health crises. Dr. Rodriguez understood the scientific challenges. Commander Sullivan planned the EI logistics. Richard provided access to architect knowledge about alien psychology. Together, they developed a comprehensive response that addressed all aspects of the crisis through cooperation and shared knowledge. The architects seemed impressed by their integrated approach. Your species shows great promise, the lead architect announced. You maintain the cognitive diversity that drives innovation while developing the technological capabilities needed for galactic citizenship. Grace felt proud of how well the human team had worked together. They had demonstrated that humanity's strength came not from individual brilliance but from their ability to combine different types of wisdom and knowledge. What happens next? Richard asked. You return to Earth with our formal invitation to join the galactic community, the architect replied. But the choice must be made by your entire species, not just your leaders. True galactic citizenship requires the participation of all cognitive types, from your most educated specialists to your most intuitive generalists. Grace understood that the aliens wanted humanity to remain diverse in their thinking as they advanced into space. The same qualities that had allowed her to solve the communication mystery would be needed to succeed among the stars. The architects provided the human crew with a communication device that would allow ongoing contact between Earth and the galactic community. The device was small and simple, looking like nothing more than a smooth stone, but it contained technology beyond human understanding. This will allow your species to communicate with us as you make your decision about galactic citizenship, the lead architect explained to Grace, placing the device in her hands. We have chosen you as the primary contact because you represent humanity's greatest strength. Grace felt the weight of responsibility as she held the device. Why me instead of the scientists or government leaders? Because you think with both knowledge and wisdom, the architect replied. Your formal leaders will make official decisions, but you will help them understand what those decisions mean for your species' future. The journey back to Earth gave the crew time to process what they had experienced. Grace spent hours looking out at the stars, thinking about how her life had changed from cleaning house to representing humanity among alien civilizations. Dr. Holmes studied the medical data from Richard's transformation. The architects didn't just modify your biology, she told him. They enhanced your natural human abilities while keeping your essential humanity intact. Richard nodded. I can access their knowledge, but I still think like a human. That's what makes the communication possible. They need our perspective as much as we need their technology. Commander Sullivan was already planning how to share the architect invitation with world leaders. This is going to change everything about how humans see themselves and their place in the universe. When the ESS Unity returned to Earth, the crew found a world that had been preparing for their return. The story of Grace's discovery and the alien contact had become public knowledge, inspiring people around the globe to think differently about intelligence and wisdom. Grace returned to Richard's estate, but her life was no longer simple. Scientists, journalists, and world leaders wanted to meet with her and learn about her experiences with the architects. She remained humble about her role while working to help humanity understand the alien invitation. The communication device allowed regular contact with the architects. Grace learned to use it by following the same pattern recognition skills that had helped her solve the original mystery. The aliens seemed pleased that their primary human contact continued to rely on intuitive understanding rather than technical training. During these communications, the architects shared more information about the galactic community. They described civilizations that had achieved amazing technological advances but lost their ability to innovate. Other species had become so specialized that they could no longer adapt to new situations. Humanity faces a choice, the architects explained to Grace during one communication session. You can follow the path of most species and optimize your education for efficiency and specialization. Or you can maintain the diversity of thinking that makes you unique in the galaxy. Grace shared these conversations with world leaders through video conferences that connected her simple apartment above the garage to the most powerful government offices on Earth. Presidents and prime ministers listened carefully to the wisdom of a woman whose insights had opened the door to the stars. Dr. Holmes established a new research institute that combined traditional knowledge with advanced science. Grace has shown us that innovation comes from bringing different perspectives together, she announced at the institute's opening ceremony. We need to value all forms of human intelligence as we prepare for our future among the stars. Richard's company transformed its mission from pure profit to supporting humanity's transition to galactic citizenship. The billionaire used his resources to fund educational programs that encouraged people to develop diverse skills and ways of thinking. I learned that wealth and power mean nothing if you lose the ability to see things from different perspectives, Richard said during a televised address. Grace saved my life by thinking differently than everyone else in the room. The decision about whether to join the galactic community could not be made quickly. It required discussions among all nations and cultures on Earth. The architects were patient, understanding that such an important choice needed time and careful consideration. Grace found herself traveling around the world, sharing her story, and helping people understand what galactic citizenship would mean. She spoke to university professors and farmers, factory workers and government officials, always emphasizing that every person's way of thinking had value. In a small village in Kenya, an elderly woman approached Grace after a presentation. "My grandmother taught me to read weather patterns by watching birds," the woman said. "Is this the kind of knowledge the star people value?" "Yes," Grace replied with certainty. "The architects told me that humanity's strength comes from having many different ways of understanding the world. Your grandmother's knowledge is just as important as any scientist's degree." Similar conversations happened everywhere Grace traveled. People began to understand that the alien invitation was not just for the educated elite, but for all of humanity's diverse ways of thinking and knowing. The global discussion about galactic citizenship continued for months. Some people worried about losing human independence by joining an alien community. Others feared that advanced alien technology would make human knowledge obsolete. Grace worked with world leaders to address these concerns through her communications with the architects. The aliens reassured humanity that partnership meant cooperation between equals, not subordination to superior beings. "We do not want to replace human thinking with our own," the architects explained. "We want to learn from your cognitive diversity while sharing our technological knowledge. Both species benefit from this exchange." As the world debated humanity's future among the stars, Grace continued her simple observations of the sky. Her grandfather's star chart still guided her understanding of celestial patterns, reminding her that wisdom often comes from the most unexpected sources. The decision about galactic citizenship would ultimately depend on whether humanity could maintain the same openness to learning from everyone, regardless of their background or education. 2 years after first contact, the United Nations held a historic vote on humanity's response to the architect invitation. Representatives from every nation had spent months consulting with their people about joining the galactic community. Grace sat in the observer's gallery, watching as the future of her species was decided. "The vote is unanimous," announced Secretary General Maria Santos. "Humanity accepts the invitation to join the galactic community as equal partners with the commitment to maintaining our cognitive diversity as we advance technologically." Grace felt tears in her eyes as the assembly erupted in applause. Her simple observations of star patterns had led to this moment when humanity officially became a spacefaring civilization. The architects responded to the news with what could only be described as joy. Through their communication device, they shared detailed plans for human integration into galactic society. Earth would receive advanced technology for space travel, medicine, and energy production. In return, humans would contribute their unique problem-solving abilities to galactic challenges. Richard's transformation became permanent, making him Earth's official ambassador to the architect civilization. But he insisted on sharing this role with Grace, recognizing that her perspective was equally valuable for representing humanity's diverse ways of thinking. "I may have the neural compatibility for alien communication," Richard told a gathering of world leaders, "but Grace has the wisdom that makes the communication meaningful." The first human colonies among the stars were established within 5 years. These settlements were designed using architect technology but organized according to human social principles. Each colony included people with diverse backgrounds and types of knowledge, from quantum physicists to traditional farmers. Grace visited the first colony on a planet orbiting the star system she had helped identify through her astronomical observations. The settlement was thriving because colonists combined advanced alien technology with practical human wisdom about living and working together. "The star people were right about us," colony leader Jake Martinez told Grace during her visit. "Our strength isn't our technology or our intelligence. It's our ability to learn from each other and adapt to new situations." Dr. Holmes established medical clinics throughout the human colonies that combined architect healing technology with traditional human medicine. "We've learned that the most effective treatments often come from combining different approaches," she explained. "Grace taught us that innovation happens when we value all forms of knowledge." The educational system on Earth and the colonies was revolutionized based on lessons learned from the architect contact. Schools began teaching students to develop multiple types of intelligence rather than specializing early in life. Grace's story became required reading, inspiring children to value their own unique ways of understanding the world. Every person thinks differently, and that's humanity's greatest gift. Grace told students during a visit to a school on Mars, "My grandfather taught me to read the stars, but your grandmother might teach you to read people or plants or patterns in music. All of these ways of knowing are important." The galactic community welcomed humanity with enthusiasm. Other alien species were fascinated by human cognitive diversity and began consulting with human advisors on problems that had puzzled them for centuries. The Zephyrians, a highly logical species, asked for human help in developing artistic expression. The Crystalline Collective wanted to understand human emotional intelligence. The machine civilization known as the Network sought human advice on maintaining creativity in their artificial minds. Humans have become the galaxy's consultants on adaptive thinking, the lead architect told Grace during one of their regular communications. Your species has proven that maintaining diversity of thought is not just possible, but essential for continued growth and innovation. Grace's role evolved from housekeeper to one of the most important people in human history. But she never forgot her humble origins or the lessons her grandfather had taught her about watching and listening carefully to the world around her. Richard's corporate empire became a foundation that supported educational diversity and funded research into different types of human intelligence. The billionaire who had once focused only on profit now dedicated his resources to ensuring that humanity's unique gifts would be preserved for future generations. "Grace saved more than my life," Richard said during the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. "She saved humanity's future by showing us that wisdom comes in many forms." The partnership with the architects opened new frontiers of knowledge and exploration. Humans traveled to distant galaxies, established colonies on hundreds of worlds, and made scientific discoveries that benefited all galactic civilizations. But they succeeded because they maintained the cognitive diversity that the architects had first recognized in Grace's simple observations. On quiet evenings, Grace still walked outside to look at the stars, using her grandfather's old charts to identify constellations. But now she also looked up at the lights of human spacecraft traveling between the stars, carrying with them the diverse ways of thinking that made humanity valuable partners in the galactic community. The story of the billionaire who was saved by 15 doctors and the housekeeper who found the missing clue became legend throughout the galaxy. It reminded all species that the most important discoveries often come from the most unexpected sources, and that true intelligence includes the wisdom to recognize and value different ways of understanding the universe. Grace Washington, once invisible as a domestic worker, had become the symbol of humanity's greatest strength: the ability to learn from everyone and combine different types of knowledge to solve the biggest challenges. Her grandfather's lessons about reading patterns in the sky had guided humanity to its destiny among the stars, proving that wisdom and wonder could be found in the most ordinary places when viewed with open eyes and an accepting heart. Humanity's journey to the stars had begun with illness and mystery, but it led to partnership and discovery because one woman paid attention to patterns that others missed. In a galaxy full of advanced civilizations, humans had found their place not as the smartest or strongest species, but as the one that best understood the value of learning from everyone and everything around them. World leaders gathered in emergency sessions as news of the alien contact spread through secure government channels. President Laura Martinez called Grace personally to thank her for the discovery that had changed human history. "Mrs. Washington, your country and your planet owe you a debt of gratitude," the president said during their video call. "Would you be willing to join the mission to meet with these architects?" Grace felt nervous about traveling to space, but she understood the importance of representing humanity's diverse ways of thinking. "If you think it will help, I'll do my best," she replied. The international space agencies worked together to prepare a spacecraft for the journey to the coordinates provided by the architects. The ESS Unity, originally designed for Mars exploration, was modified to carry a small diplomatic team to the meeting location. Richard's transformation continued over the following weeks. His body adapted to serve as a communication bridge between humans and the architects. The process was painless now that the medical team stopped fighting it, and Richard remained conscious and aware throughout. "I can feel them in my mind," Richard told Grace during one of their conversations. "They're not controlling my thoughts, just sharing their knowledge. It's like having access to a vast library of information about the galaxy." Grace spent her time preparing for the mission by working with astronomers and linguists who were trying to understand architect communication methods. Her natural ability to recognize patterns proved invaluable in interpreting alien concepts. Dr. Rodriguez became Grace's training partner, teaching her about space travel while learning from Grace's intuitive understanding of celestial mechanics. "You think about astronomy the way poets think about language," Dr. Rodriguez told her. "You see connections that pure science sometimes misses." The media attention was overwhelming. Grace found herself the subject of news stories around the world as reporters tried to understand how a housekeeper had made the most important discovery in human history. She remained humble about her role, always crediting her grandfather's teachings. "People are calling you a hero," a television reporter said during an interview at the estate. "I just paid attention to patterns," Grace replied. "My grandfather always said that wisdom comes from watching and thinking, not from having fancy equipment." The architects continued communicating through Richard, providing technical specifications for improving the spacecraft and ensuring safe travel to the meeting coordinates. They seemed genuinely interested in human welfare and wanted the mission to succeed. "Your species fascinates us," the architects said during one session. "Most civilizations we encounter have optimized their education systems to produce specialists. You maintain generalists who can bridge different fields of knowledge." Dr. Holmes asked, "Is that why you chose to communicate through Richard and Grace rather than our top scientists?" "Richard was chosen for neural compatibility," the architects explained. "Grace was chosen by circumstances that demonstrate human adaptability. The combination represents your species better than any formal delegation could." Launch day arrived after 3 months of preparation. Grace felt nervous as she put on her spacesuit for the first time. She had never imagined that her life would lead to traveling among the stars, but she was determined to represent humanity well. The ESS Unity launched from the International Space Station with a crew of 6. Grace, Richard, Dr. Holmes, Dr. Rodriguez, Commander Jake Sullivan, and Communication Specialist Lisa Chen. The journey to the meeting coordinates would take 2 weeks. During the flight, Grace spent time looking out the spacecraft windows at the stars. They looked different from space, brighter and more numerous than she had ever seen from Earth. She thought about her grandfather and wished he could see how his lessons about reading the sky had led to this amazing journey. Richard's connection to the architects grew stronger as they traveled farther from Earth. He could communicate with them continuously now, providing updates on human progress and receiving guidance about the upcoming meeting. "They're excited to meet us," Richard told the crew. "Apparently, it's been several thousand years since they encountered a species with potential for galactic citizenship." "What happened to the last species they contacted?" Commander Sullivan asked. "They became too specialized and lost their adaptability," Richard replied. "The architects had to classify them as a protected species rather than partners. They hope humanity will avoid the same fate." Grace listened to these conversations while thinking about what made humans special. According to the architects, it was not superior intelligence or technology, but the ability to value different types of knowledge and combine them in creative ways. As they approached the meeting coordinates, the spacecraft's instruments detected a massive artificial structure waiting for them. The architect vessel was unlike anything humans had ever built, composed of materials that seemed to shift and change like living tissue. "Welcome, humans," came the architect message through Richard. "We are pleased that you accepted our invitation. The individual called Grace Washington will find the meeting particularly interesting, as we have much to learn from her perspective." Grace felt honored, but also nervous about meeting beings from another world. She reminded herself that she was representing not just herself but all the people on Earth who learned wisdom from experience rather than formal education. The ESS Unity docked with the architect vessel, using technology that the aliens provided. As the airlocks opened, Grace prepared to take her first steps into a larger universe. carrying with her the lessons her grandfather had taught about reading patterns in the stars. The meeting that followed would determine whether humanity was ready to join the galactic community as partners, or would need more time to develop their unique gifts. Grace carried the hopes of her planet as she walked through the airlock, a simple woman whose observations had opened the door to the stars.